to have Tori and Richard Brooks with us today. We had a great online service. They had no idea what to expect. And so I had this whole big story that I laid out about how they were wandering the streets, and I invited them in and all of that stuff, whole big story. I got to the punchline, and I realized I forgot to hit the streaming button. So no one heard it but us. Because I couldn't figure out why no one was responding in the thing. I forgot to hit the streaming button, and so we didn't get that. But I tell you, they did such a beautiful job. If you get a chance to watch that sometime, it's on YouTube, on Facebook Live. Please do that. But excited to be able to hear from them and hear what God has done in their lives. I could tell their story was just so amazing what God has done. But I'm going to let them share that and share what God is doing in their lives as missionaries to Belgium. And so we're going to invite, I think Richard's going to come first, and then Tori will come, and they'll take this part of the service. We'll have a word of prayer with them at the end of the service as well. So let's welcome Richard and Tori Brooks to us today.
Good morning. How's everyone doing? Good. Doing good. I'm excited for the lunch today to be able to celebrate Thanksgiving again. I could do Thanksgiving weekly, so this is wonderful. So I'm Richard. My wife Tori is here, and our daughter Carice was the one walking in front with the really long pink bow. We have the picture up here of us. We are missionaries to Belgium. Now, I want to start with a quick question. What is something you know about Belgium? Chocolate. Waffles. Yes, French fries. They should be called Belgian fries because the Belgians invented them. But you can show the next picture. I have a picture of chocolate up here. So this is actually from a place called New House. It's in Belgium, and what's great about this place, and also a curse, but what's great is you can go in, and they have unlimited free samples of the chocolate truffles. And then so you can try one, you can try two, you can try 15. As many as you want of all the different flavors. They hope that you buy something afterwards. But you can try all of them. Now, we've gone in there a number of times because it's only about 10 minutes from where we were living. And the first bite is just amazing. I know we're about to eat, and I'm probably making some of you a little hungry. I apologize. But the first one is just so good. And the second one, and the 10th one. But then you start to hit the 15th. And it's like, the taste in your mouth isn't so good anymore. Your stomach starts to feel sick from all of the sugar. And slowly, one candy at a time, one chocolate at a time, you realize this isn't feeling so good anymore. That's kind of what's happened in Europe. Europe right now is at roughly 3% of its population. The whole of Europe is roughly 3% having a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And this is something that happened slowly over time. It didn't happen overnight. It wasn't like I tried one thing or that they tried this one thing and then the next day they were like, okay, we're going to be atheists now. It was over time of letting one thing after another into their lives that took the place of God. And what I'm going to share with you guys this morning is found in 1 Kings chapter 3, starting with verse 1. We're going to look at the life of Solomon. We're going to look at how he started and how he ended. And we're going to see that his life is a good illustration not only for what's happened in Europe, but also for what can happen in our own lives. And so this is how it starts with verse 1. And it should be up here as well. Yeah, perfect. Solomon made a marriage alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt. He took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her into the city of David until he had finished building his own house and the house of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. The people were sacrificing at the high places, however, because no house had yet been built for the name of the Lord. Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of David his father. Only he sacrificed and made offerings at the high places. And the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the great high place. Solomon used to offer 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. So we're going to start here. This is the moment when Solomon, he's king, and he's starting to make his name known. He's starting to really become known throughout not only Israel, but even in the world a bit. And it says that he marries the daughter of Pharaoh. Now, what's interesting is they don't give the name of the daughter. They just say the daughter of Pharaoh. So most likely, this is just a political alliance. And what Solomon's doing by bringing her into the city of David, what he's doing is he's saying to the rest of the world, look at me, look at Israel. We have an alliance with Egypt. You don't want to mess with us. So you start here, and we see in this passage that Solomon's already letting something come into his life that's taking the place of what God should have been. He's now putting his trust in the Egyptians more than he is in God. And we know that because God in Deuteronomy tells us, he tells the people of Israel, he says, you're not supposed to intermarry with foreign women. And he quotes this passage later on that I'll share. But this idea of intermarriage was prohibited by God because of what it could potentially lead to. And so Solomon starts in this idea of putting Pharaoh and Egypt as his ally, seeing them as his strength. And then he worships God in the high places. It says, it even says, however, they still worshipped. They still worshipped God in these high places. Now, Israel, again, didn't start within Israel. They came from Egypt and moved into this nation, and God pushed out all of the pagan gods and religions and people that were there. But when they sent them away, their high places still remained. And the high places were the places where they worshipped their false gods. And so Solomon is going to these places as well as the people of Israel, and they're mixing. They're just, they're still worshiping God, and it's clear because he says, Solomon loved the Lord. And that word for love is a commitment. It's this, I'm committed to God. I love him so much that I'm committed to follow him. And so there is this commitment, but there's also this little, well, we'll put in a little bit of something else in there too. His full devotion to God is starting to waver a little bit. He's starting to add things to his relationship with God, to the point where he's participating in the services on these places. He's giving himself, he's letting these things into his life that are starting to influence how he's been serving God. He still serves God, but he's let these little things into his life. You can put the next picture up. This is a picture of us in our, this is our apartment at the school in CTS where I'm currently doing my master's. And I love video games, love video games and movies and all that kind of stuff. I absolutely love it. I have a PS5. I love playing video games. When we had to move to Belgium 2 years ago, we didn't have space to drag a TV along with us. That was heartbreaking. That was hard. It's the thing that I always did to relax. It's the thing that I always did to kind of get my mind off the difficulties of life and off the troubles that we go through. And for me, I had to make a decision in that moment before we went to Belgium. I had to say, is this the only thing that can help me through difficult times? Or should I be trusting in God? Now, I still play video games. I'm not saying I got rid of all of that. But in that moment, I had to say, you know what? I may not be able to play games, and I may not be able to watch movies like I used to when I get there. But I know that God is going to get me through the difficult times anyway. Because it's not the games that helped me. It was the God who gave me the games that helped me. And I had to realize in that moment, this can't be a little thing that influences my relationship with God. And I decided before we left that if this is what we have to do, this is what we have to do. Eventually, God blessed us with a TV, which was really cool. And that's why we're all watching Lord of the Rings together. Because that's what you do in a Bible college. You all watch Lord of the Rings together. And so he blessed us with that TV, but also so we could be a blessing to others and so that they could enjoy Lord of the Rings with us. It's very easy in our lives for something to start to slip in, to kind of be added to what God is in our life. For something like a job or a hobby or a person. It's very easy for someone or something to just kind of start pushing God out a little bit. Not that we're saying, okay, we're no longer a Christian, or we're not saying, I don't trust God anymore. But we're saying, in this one area, I really enjoy this thing. And even if we're not willing to admit it, it may be that our trust is more in that than in God. And it starts with a little thing. It starts with a little thing. But then, that little thing becomes a big thing. It becomes a big thing. In 1 Kings chapter 11, now we're skipping ahead to more the end of Solomon's story. And we're going to sit here in verses 1 through 8 for the rest. But this is what it says in 1 through 4. Now King Solomon loved many foreign women, along with the daughter of Pharaoh, Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonian, and Hittite women, from the nations concerning which the Lord had said to the people of Israel, "You shall not enter into marriage with them, neither shall they with you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods." Solomon clung to these in love. He had 700 wives who were princesses and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. For when Solomon was old, his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not wholly true to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father. The same word that Solomon uses of he loved the Lord is the exact same word that is used that he loved his wives. His commitment to God, because he let these little things in his life, he let these little things that just seemed like, it's okay, it's just a little bit. It turned his entire perspective around, where now that same word of love and commitment is being used of his wives. And again, wives, it shows the number of, before I get there, it says that he clung to them in love. He clung to them in that kind of love. It emphasizes the fact that he was faithful to these wives, to where whatever they said, he would do, which is literally what it says in verse 8. It says that, and I'm going to get there, but it basically says that whatever his wives wanted, he did. Whatever they sought, he was willing to do for them. And he put them above his relationship with God. He put them above. Like I said, he's quoting Deuteronomy here, where it says, "For surely they will turn your heart after their gods." And we see this begin to happen here. We see this begin to happen because it says, not only does it say, "and his wives turned away his heart," it says that Solomon, his heart was turned away, and it was not wholly true to his God as David, his father's, was. Now, a lot of times we read this and we see, wow, 700 wives. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of wives. I don't know how you could do that, first off, just speaking honestly. That's a lot of people to take care of and to truly show commitment and love too. But this number is potentially real. There's a lot of stories about, like within Egypt, where people there's one story where they had 2,000 wives in their house. I mean, obviously, it's not a small house. Like they were higher up in rank, and so they would have had a lot of spouses. But this idea of 700 wives is to say, not only is he committed to seeing Egypt as his source of power and his source of help, but now he's seeing all these other nations as the ones that are going to hold him up. It's this political arrangement of they're my strength. He's no longer seeing God as his strength. He's seeing these other powers as his strength. He's seeing them as his strength, and they end up turning him to their false gods, just like Scripture said would happen. The little things now have become the big thing. If you put up the next picture, I have these 2 jars of beans, and I just want to give a little illustration about what the atmosphere of Europe looks like. The one on your right represents the United States here. 27% of Americans claim a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. That means when you go to school, when you go to the grocery store, when you go to work, wherever it is, there are roughly 3 out of every 4 people you meet that don't have a personal relationship with Jesus. That means there's so many people that we can share the gospel with, that we can be a light to them. The other jar represents Belgium, where 1.3% of Belgians claim a personal relationship with Jesus. That means there are so few people that can even present the gospel. That means the majority of Belgians will pass away before they've ever even heard the message of Jesus. I bring that up here in this particular part of Scripture because that's how far Europe has fallen. That's how far. Now instead of Europe being this place where Christianity reigned for 2,000 years, where the majority of church history has happened, and trust me, if you ever get the chance to go to Europe, there are churches everywhere. Everywhere there is a church, and they're all empty. They're all empty. We're going to be serving with the Flemish Pentecostal movement in northern Belgium. And right now, that's a population of roughly 6.5 million people. But just within the Flemish Pentecostal movement, they claim roughly 40 churches with an average of less than 15 people. That means there are less than 800 Pentecostals among 6.5 million people. And that's the statistic for the majority of religious faiths in northern Belgium. There are so few people who know. And they need someone to come in and to be a voice of God in their midst, to show up in those places where there's no light beams there. There's no people who have the light of Christ there. And that's what we're believing God's going to do with us, that he's going to put us in those places where there's no one else to share the gospel. Like Solomon, they've come to this point where they've put their trust in everything else. A really good example of this when it comes to Belgium. How many of you guys love to pay taxes? Just absolutely are like, man, I can't wait for tax season. Yeah, most people are not. In Belgium, they seem to love it because their income tax rate is 53%. 53%. More than half their paycheck goes right back to the government. Because for them, they are so afraid of what will happen when they retire that they want a guarantee that, okay, the government at least will take care of me, that the government will be my support. And they put all of their trust and all of their hope in the government. And that's what they depend on. And they say they're the ones that are going to be our support. Like with Solomon, he says, all these other nations will be our power and our strength and our support. In Belgium, it's the government. For them, they're putting all of their eggs in the one government basket. And that's how they view life. They're constantly worried about what's going to happen in the end because all they see is the temporal. All they see is what's now. They don't see anything else because they don't believe in something else. All they see is, I need to retire as quickly as possible so I can live a really nice retirement and just die. They don't even want eternal life. When you ask them about it, they say, who would want to live forever? Who would want that? Because for them, they don't see what God can do even in this life. How much of an impact he can make in this life. Because they've let all these other little things become the big thing. And this big thing is now what they worship. It's now what they serve. The little thing has become everything for them. In Belgium and for Solomon. One question that we always ask, or that I was always asked maybe, was where do you spend your time, your talents, and your resources? Where do you spend the gifts that God has given you? Where do you spend your time? And where do you spend your finances? And what I was always told is when you look at those three things, it can tell you what you worship. So for you today, I don't know where you spend those things. One thing I can say is you're here at church on Sunday, so you care about it in that sense, right? You've given that time to say, God, speak to me. I want you to be the Lord of my life. In Belgium, they don't do that. The majority of people don't go to church, maybe on an Easter or a Christmas, but that's it. That's the only time that they might. But God is saying today, what are the things that you spend your time, talents, and resources on? Because those can give you a good idea of what has become a big thing in your life. What has become something starting to push God out. The last verses say this, verses 5 through 8. For Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. So Solomon did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and did not wholly follow the Lord as David his father had done. Then Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, for Molech, the abomination of the Ammonites, on the mountain east of Jerusalem. And so he did for all his foreign wives, who made offerings and sacrificed to their gods. So just quickly, it's in the language, in the Hebrew here, it's equating two words. Goddess and abomination are equated here in the Hebrew grammatically. And so what he's saying is these things that have become gods, that people worship as gods, are abominations. The word abomination there is literally translated as filth. So what he's saying is Solomon has now turned away from God to worship filth. The things that we've let into our lives, the things that we see our security in, are nothing but filth. When they're the thing that we depend on, they may be something that God uses to help us, but when they become God in that place, when they take his place, what happens is we've let filth run our life. These nations that he talks about are the exact nations that Solomon has married into. These nations that he's married into are the same nations that God in Deuteronomy specifically says, don't marry into these nations. Every single one of them is a nation that God has already said, these are the nations you have to avoid. Like, stay away from these. He's now letting those nations into his life. He started with Pharaoh and Egypt, but now he's letting in these other religions that God has explicitly, specifically said, do not. And he doesn't just go to the high places to worship now. He actively is building high places and building places of worship for these false gods. They're building, he's this man who loved God only 8 chapters ago. And now at the end of his life, because of how his love has shifted to these women and these false gods that he's now worshiping, he's now building, instead of altars to God, he's building places of worship for false gods, which means he's actively working against God and encouraging the people of Israel to enter in with him. It says that he built these right outside of Jerusalem, the holy city of God. And he's encouraging the people to join with him in this. It's no longer just, this is my thing, this is, I'm turning to God myself, but now he's actively promoting for others to turn from God. He's actively and has completely turned. Where it says he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. No longer is he the man that loved God, that sacrificed 1,000 animals. He's now the one sacrificing to the Lord's enemies. Actively sacrificing. He let these little things in his life begin to control him. He let these things that maybe it was what others had said, maybe it was just he wanted these things. And in our lives, it's similar to that, where we let these things come into our life, whether people have said things about us or whether we've really enjoyed something and wanted it into our life. Whatever the case may be, those things now run our life. Those things now control our life. I'm going to have Tori come up now, and she's going to share a little bit about what she does in Belgium.
So I have had the privilege of serving the human trafficking victims and the sexually exploited red light district workers in Antwerp, which is the largest red light district in Belgium. And I'm just going to tell a quick story of a tale of 2 girls whom we've had a relationship with, serving them for the last several years. Both of these women come from religious traditions, one from an Eastern Orthodox country and religious tradition, and one from Latin America. And the labels that stick when you hear what people call you when you're in that situation, whether it's your choice or not, it can really, it can cause a lot of trauma, and it can be something that people really hold tight to. So for this one individual who comes from the Eastern Orthodox tradition, from a very poor country, I believe well-meaning, religious leaders have said to discourage people from moving to one of the wealthier countries and doing this type of work. They tell them that it's the unforgivable sin to enter into prostitution. Now, it is a sin, obviously, but the unforgivable sin, and that is a wound that, especially if you are in a situation where you did not choose that for yourself, that is a deep, deep wound in their heart. And this particular individual, this friend of ours, she holds tight to that, and as a result of that, she can't see that there is a God. Because she was put into this position and she had been told that that is the unforgivable sin, so she cannot reconcile within her mind how there could be a God. Because that was something that I have no way of redemption. Because it wasn't their choice, and she is cast aside forever from God. And in her mind, she has held so tight to that and has clung to that, and that has become her path to atheism. Now the other girl, she's from Latin American country, and she had similar, not quite as unforgivable sin type of things spoken to her, but she had shame. She carried shame from the the way that her life has turned out. And earlier this year, we were going through the Bible story as we do. We always have a Bible study when we meet, and we were going through the story of the prodigal son. And something really interesting happened earlier this year. It was back in March. We were sitting there, and she was hearing this story, and she had heard it before, but the Lord was really working on her heart that day. And I got to see just her come to this realization that, hey, if God the Father loves this son who spat on his face, who stole all of his inheritance and dishonored his family, he did all of that and yet ran to him. He could do that for me. And the Holy Spirit used that message, and he used that Bible study, and it was like the fog lifted off of her eyes. She was having this light bulb moment that she was not too far gone. And I got to see how she came to the Lord that day and how she is living without that guilt, without that shame. And she has God as the big thing in her life again.
I want to close with just one last thing. It should be the last slide on there. Show me your friends, and I'll show you your future. This is what my youth pastor told us every single week when I was in youth group. Show me your friends, and I'll show you your future. The people who influence your life will turn you to the things that they serve. That's how it works. That's how it worked with Solomon. That's how it worked in Belgium. That's how it works wherever we go in life. The things that we associate with eventually become the things that we worship. And I wanted to just close. Could I invite you guys up to pray for you and your wife? In Belgium, one of the biggest struggles is they don't have pastors for churches. So they don't have someone who can speak into their lives, who can say, God has a plan besides what you feel, whatever's controlling your life, God has a better way. And in Belgium, they don't have that option because the majority of the churches don't even have a pastor. And so what I want to do is pray for your pastors. And I would ask you if you would stretch out your hands to your pastors. God, we thank you so much for the Sabellas here at Hope Assembly, oh God. We thank you that you have called them, that you have placed them in this house, that you have placed them as your ministers to every single person that walks through this door. You have given them words to speak. You have given them something to say, to present you to those people, to us who have given our lives to something that is only hurting and destroying us. God, I pray that you would bless them today, that you would honor them today, that you would show them vision for this church and community, that you would give them new vision, oh God, for what you are doing in this place. I pray for that every single person here, that they would know how much their pastors care for and love them, that they would know how much effort and how much work and how much prayer time they put in for the people here. God, I pray that you would bless them, that you would honor them, and that you would give them a special word from you, something unique to them. And I ask it in your mighty name. Amen.